Hello, America. How are you? In a time when suspicion, misinformation, and division threaten to unravel our shared story, we believe it's time to listen again. Here on the Voices of Americans, we gather real people for real conversations, sharing truths, not headlines. Stories have always been the heartbeat of change, and just like the words etched into our currency, e pluribus unum, out of many, one, we believe that by listening to each other, we can remember who we are and imagine who we might become. This is the Voices of Americans. Thank you for joining us today on this very first episode of Voices of Americans. I just want to say a little bit about this initiative and why we are doing this. And then I want to welcome our first person into the space and also just let you know that there'll probably be others dropping in and out. So, Voices of Americans, we're in a difficult time right now in this country, but we didn't get here overnight and we're not going to get out of it overnight. As a 5-year-old, actually this month, this week, when I was 5, I spent about a month with an African American woman in Greenwood, Mississippi. I was the only white kid and I got to cross the color line, as they say, and be exposed to something that I did not understand as a 5-year-old. It's taken me my whole life to realize that the dignity that exists within human beings, be they black, white, Asian, all the different varieties of the beautiful ways people show up in this lifetime. It didn't occur to me till later on in life that, especially with an African American population, in the South especially, in Greenwood, Mississippi, in that time especially, there was a lot going on, things I did not understand. But the primary memory I have is of a person having dignity and worth and value. So that has stayed with me my entire life. And I have been driven, especially in these times of contention and division, to try to bring people together because our narratives, our backgrounds are different. And we can't only just listen through our own perspective. We have to set aside our judgments or our preconceived notions and make space to listen to someone else. And one of the ways that we can find common ground right now is to talk about some of our core values. So, Lisa, I'm glad you joined me. There may be people popping in and out, as you know. And first of all, I'd like for you to identify yourself just in the limited way that you feel free to do and safe to do, quite frankly. And I want you to name a core value, if that's something you feel like you're ready to do. And then I want you to tell a little bit of a story about why you hold that value.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm delighted to be here. Uh, my name is Lisa Henderson, and I grew up in the southern part of the United States. I've lived in Atlanta for many, many years, with the exception of 4 years in South Africa. And that was an amazing experience. And I've lived all over the country. I've lived in Boston and Rhode Island and Memphis and New Orleans and South Florida. But at the core, I'm a Southern girl.
Yeah.
And much like you, my awakening to trying to understand the difference between black and white as a 7-year-old was very pronounced. And the woman who took care of me, her name was Alma. And I said, I finally figured it out. And I had really been pondering. And she said, What, honey? And I said, Why we can't eat lunch at the same table. And she said, Well, what is that? And I said, Because I would turn black too.
Mm.
And she laughed and said, No, that's not it. And I think this came up in the work that we did together with the beloved community. It still baffles my mind. Like, I didn't understand the differences then. I think what I would have to say is my core value at this point in my life, and it's a difficult one, is authenticity.
Oh, yeah.
It's
That's a good one.
being true to me,
Mhm.
without being hurtful or putting anybody else down, but how do I fully show up as myself? And I think what I'm encountering so much in my world right now is fear,
Mm.
lots and lots of fear. And my feeling is all I can do is I can show up as me and hopefully bring light into each situation and hope,
Mhm.
and without being Pollyanna-ish.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's a great core value to lead with. And just to connect with you on that, because partly what we do in these story groups is try to find ways that you can connect and go, oh, yeah, I totally get that about you because I do, So it kind of helps facilitate storytelling among people, which builds loyalty and trust. And I used to run what I called authenticity groups out of my therapy practice. But you've had some different experiences throughout your life. Obviously, since you've lived in multiple places, I'd love to hear more about South Africa. What took you there, why you were there, what you learned while you were there, and you got something stirred in you as a child, as I did, and you didn't abandon that within yourself. You pursued that curiosity to help you become more authentic throughout your life.
Yeah.
So talk, if you would, a little bit about what took you to South Africa. Why did you move around so much? Like, what did you learn? What's your progression of learning?
Well, I moved around so much because I was in radio for many years. And in order to climb up the ladder, you had to move a lot.
Gotcha.
So I landed in Atlanta in 1982 and stayed here. But before that, I was jumping. My husband and I had gone on safari in
Okay.
2007. It had been one of his dreams and one of my dreams. And we spent a week, and it was heavenly,
Mm,
literally. I've never felt closer to God, just
mm,
seeing all the, you would take a picture and then go to show it to somebody, you couldn't see anything. It's like that's how perfect the camouflage is.
yeah.
And we looked at moving there in 2007, and my son was 13, and there wasn't high-speed internet. Forget high speed. There was very little internet, and we were both working. So we ended up in 2014 retiring there
Oh, wow.
and built a house on a game reserve.
Mm,
So I had giraffes in the front yard and leopards and lions roaring at night. It was magical. It was amazing. It was also very disheartening because apartheid still
yeah.
exists. It's gone on paper. It is very much alive in the psyche of South Africa.
Mm,
And that was really difficult for me because I had lived in the South in the 60s
mm,
and I knew what that looked like. And it was like walking into that exact same scenario.
mm,
So I lasted about 4 years and came back to Atlanta. My husband stayed for another four, and we traveled back and forth.
mm.
And he ended up moving back here shortly before he died.
Yeah. Sorry.
But it was, thank you. It was a great experience in that I understood what it was like to be an outsider,
Hmm.
that no matter how long I stayed, no matter how much people liked me, I would never be part of. And I was also seen as a radical and a rebel, and that was fine with me.
Hmm.
That was a comfortable place for me to be.
So
Um,
you were saying that you felt like an outsider and that you, no matter how long you stayed, you realized you would never belong in the same way. What do you make of that?
yeah.
What do you attribute to that?
Well, I mean, part of it is I was a foreigner
Hmm.
and I would never understand. I tried to talk to my white South African friends about racism, and they would say, we're not racist. I realized my experience of growing up in America, in the South, in the midst of the civil rights movement,
Hmm.
and being kind of the radical that I was, they were never going to get me.
Mm.
And I was never going to get them. I could try to put myself in their place, but they would talk to me about racism exists on both sides.
Mm.
And white people moved into their country and displaced the Africans.
Yeah.
And what I did find was I learned one of the tribal languages. Uh, enough that I could talk like a 2-year old, like,
Yeah.
hello, please, thank you. And I was able to be more involved in the African community because of that,
Gotcha.
going to church, going to funerals,
Mhm.
having parties for the African women that ran the households on the estate that we lived on. So it was very rewarding and very upsetting in a way.
But it sounds like that the bridge that you attempted to build came through language, right? And an effort
Yes.
to try to learn, right? So there's a little bit of fear and vulnerability about people these days, trying to learn something that doesn't come natural for them, perhaps. And, it makes people feel a little more vulnerable so that they get defensive and can't show up in a space, to kind of decenter themselves so that it's not about them. So, what would you say to people that are trying to learn or listen differently right now?
Well, I'm having to learn to do that as well because I tend to immediately go into this is wrong, this is terrible, the outcome's going to be bad, we need to do this, that, and the other. Instead of, and I've learned a lot of this from my son, who's 30 and is very active politically,
Hmm.
is what do we have in common?
You mean
What
between you and your son, or he's teaching you how to be?
he's teaching me about looking at it more globally. What do we have in common?
Yeah.
I'm not a billionaire. I will never be a billionaire.
But hey,
I,
another South African who now lives here is, right?
well, yeah, send him back. I have a Tesla, and on the back of it, I have anti Elon
I
Musk.
think I saw
Like,
that car the other day.
I don't want anybody to get any idea that I like that
Somebody
man.
seriously posted a picture. It might have been your car. They erased the tag. I bet that was your car.
There was a time where I wouldn't say this. I can say, I love this country.
Yeah. This definitely is a moral moment, I believe. Was it Cory Booker that said that, or am I remembering something that I heard Raphael Warnock say? You're right to say that we have to find the common ground. I think one of the main critiques that I kind of got convicted about, similarly, it sounds like to you, is a lot of the more progressive voices that are coming forth with rage and venom are matching and mirroring some of the ways in which the more conservative voices and narratives have been coming forth and making statements and one of the critiques of somebody like me is you're too condescending. You're coming across as too condescending. You think we're just dumb. Well, listen, I grew up in Appalachia. I know what it's like to feel like people think you're dumb. I mean, just listen to my accent. So no, I don't want to come across, I don't want to repeat what I used to feel like. I don't want to repeat that with my my fellow Appalachians. I don't want to convey that condescending tone. So I've checked myself a lot because I actually am smart and you are too. But I also value the people that don't have the same educational trajectory that I do, because there's people that didn't graduate from high school that are some of the smartest people, to
Yeah.
me, right? So it's not about educational degrees or letters after your name. And look, I got a bunch. Look, I've got mine up there. But
Yes,
it's
you
it's
do.
about can you see people for who they are in authentic ways, and you're spot on with that value. Um, so what is it that you think is needed right now as we try to listen better to one another?
I think the main thing would be to go for our commonalities.
Yeah.
Okay. I, I am a senior. I have a fixed income.
Right.
I mean, I was so excited when I found eggs the other day for $3.50. And I mean, I think about that, how ridiculous that sounds.
Mhm.
But if I want a cage-free egg and I buy it at Publix, it's $7.
Yeah.
Well, uh, that means no eggs. Okay, well, that's fine. But,
Mhm.
and I am very privileged in many, many ways. But I think the truth is, we are all going to suffer from the decisions that are being made. So let's look at it like that. I'm not a billionaire, never will be a billionaire. I don't really like the idea of billionaires running the country.
Yes.
My thinking is, how can I stay as positive as possible,
Right.
as loving as possible, not try to make somebody else wrong, which it's not easy. I struggle with it every single time I turn on the news. Like, well, that's what you voted for. That's what you get.
Yeah. Hmm.
The truth is, we all buy into certain things, and how can we come together for what we really want? And I think what we all want is really the same. We all want to love. We all want to let the people that we love be happy and free and have a better life.
Hmm.
And then how do we get to that? And one of the things I did learn from my son was going into forums that are not necessarily political.
Hmm.
He wants to live in Pittsburgh. He lives here now, but he wants to live in Pittsburgh. So he will go to a Pittsburgh forum on Facebook and say, this is why I would like to move to Pittsburgh because your educational system is so good, XYZ. Not, I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, what, any of that, but to find these are the common things
Yes.
and not to necessarily come across antagonistically.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. But sometimes, there is a limit to where, you can go with that, right? So like for instance, one thing that I've gotten really clear about, and it just in terms of my value of dignity, that I learned, from this woman in Mississippi, actually, is integrity, right? So like if you're going to acknowledge someone's dignity, another human being's dignity, then you have to have integrity about how you engage with that person, how you advocate for that person, and how you will defend that person if necessary. So, as long as someone is not lying and being fraudulent and trying to take from people, you know, I will defend that person, I find, and I will advocate for that person. If they have different perspectives from me, that's cool. But the common thing that comes out of more my core value of integrity is I can't look myself in the mirror if I let somebody else speak ill of another human being, no matter what I have in common with them or not. Unless
Yes.
that person is, like I say, a liar and a fraudulent, actor. I'm not going to defend that. I think that's kind of like where we are right now. And I know that you have had some different experiences in your life and you've learned some similar lessons. I know that you've done some advocacy work. One of the stories I remember you telling, right, in the beloved, we called it beloved community group, but you told a story about what it was like for you to have your mask on, and you chose a specific mask that had a specific message because you live primarily in black spaces and attend a black church, and you wanted to be conscious of your white skin in those spaces, and you wanted to represent in an authentic way to you. So could you tell about that time and how you made some of those decisions?
It's really interesting. Yes, I lived on the south side of Atlanta in primarily black neighborhood. So everywhere I went, I was typically the only white person there. So I got a Black Lives Matter mask and
Hmm.
I had a bumper sticker for my car because I didn't want to be like, I was the other, but I didn't want to be perceived as being against.
Yeah.
And that was all, that was great. And people liked my mask, and I felt really good about it. Like, okay, I'm making a statement. I got my nails done and I had my mask on, and this woman was talking really loud on her speaker.
Hmm.
I said, could you bring that down a little bit? And she came after me like, yeah, Karen, like the
Oh,
white, you know,
yeah.
like saying honky almost,
Yeah.
yeah, Karen, what do you know? Telling me to go be quiet. And I'm thinking, I have on my Black Lives Matter mask.
Yeah.
And like I took it off and looked at it and put it back on because I was like, maybe she didn't see my
Oh,
mask.
that's interesting.
She saw it,
Hmm.
but it didn't matter.
Yeah.
I was still
Yeah.
the other.
Yeah.
And, I think it's kind of like the thing in South Africa, I will never be part of. I
Hmm.
can show I'm an ally, I can show I advocate,
Hmm.
but by the same token, I'll never. And I found out she came in a couple of weeks later and was doing the same thing. And these three black women were like, honey, turn your phone off.
Yeah. Yeah. But it does,
But
it's true though. I mean, we do have to kind of check ourselves and kind of go, well, there's something right about what she's saying because you are in her space in a way. And
yeah,
even though you're signifying something and signaling something, that's not enough. So
yeah.
this is where DEI really matters, diversity, equity, inclusion, because it helps us get to that, not just find the common ground, but get to that uh, extra space where the beloved community, in this case, can actually exist. And to her really real credit, Dr. Bernice King is carrying on her father's legacy with this work by associating beloved community with the triple evils that her father identified. And I'm not going to try to repeat those off the top of my head. One of them is militarism. And also, let's just note that while we're slashing jobs and budgets and, finding fraud and displacing many people and taking away their ability to have an earned income, our president is planning to have a 4 mile long military parade. Just let that sink in. Anyway, so there's more to it than just like signaling, right? And I think that's partly what you're trying to tell with that particular scene. And of course, it does hurt to be called a Karen. What's some of the history of that? You know, why is that an issue? And here you're on the right side of history in a lot of ways, but it still falls on you and me, right, to recognize the history. I think that's partly why it's not just good enough to kind of like try to align in certain kind of ways or to advocate in other kind of ways, that the learning is ongoing. We never reach the place where we've learned enough.
And Melissa, I learned so much in doing the work at the same time that I was doing the work with you. I had a podcast, an anti-racist, pro-black podcast, and I have come since then and currently and probably ongoing for the rest of my life, what white privilege looks like.
Yeah.
The nuanced, the gradations, the
Hmm.
just the little things that I never realized, like, oh, that's white privilege.
Yeah.
Oh,
I never heard the term microaggression before until we were doing that work. And I'm
mhm.
like, wow, that's meaningful, you know.
I just trying to kind of look at that as it comes
Hmm.
and see like, oh yeah, that's white privilege.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make me wrong. I don't have to be ashamed, but
Hmm.
I do need to look at it and go, oh yeah, that's where I had a leg up because of the color of my
Yeah.
skin.
Yeah. So it didn't matter if you had Black Lives Matter across your face or wherever.
No.
It's still, I mean, it's a good thing to do because it's something you're trying to do the thing that is authentic to you, but you can't just stop there, right? I think that's what I hear you saying, what I appreciate about your trajectory. And I want you to talk a little bit more about what you're doing right now. But first, I want to just say, when we were doing those groups, I had no idea what was going to happen and what was going to come of it. But it was valuable enough. There were really pilot groups. There were 7 of them, They were really pilot groups. It was valuable enough to get to see everybody's experiences with that, to think that, it could become an offering into corporate workspaces, because the backstories of all these kinds of what has been called woke, although that term has been
Oh, yeah.
reappropriated incorrectly, I should say. Well, that's another day. It's been labeled too quickly and too swiftly without the deeper understanding of the histories and the legacies and the meaning. So diversity, equity, inclusion being slashed and and people being afraid of that and cutting that out. We're not going to heal as America if we don't continue to learn histories and legacies. And it's almost like, even though we all speak English, at least, not all across America do we only speak English, but oftentimes in some of these kinds of conversations, even though we're using the same words that we hear and recognize and know the meanings of, according to Webster or whatever, or what's that other, you can look up certain kind of slang, to can't think of it now, but
GPT.
yeah, yeah. That there's alternative meanings and ways of incorporating the backstories around that. So that's all a secondary kind of learning that needs to happen. And you can get defensive and be that Karen, right? That calls out and gets angry and gets your feelings hurt and starts crying. And I can say this to you easily because I know you know what I'm talking about. The fastest way to shut down any kind of dialogue is for a white woman to start shedding tears, right? I mean, that is,
Amen.
I mean, yeah, whatever. But you can do that and it'll get us nowhere. It'll just heap on more of the trauma and the pain and the suffering. Or you can go, let me just sit back and learn something here. I'm not going to take this personally. I'm going to listen and not get triggered myself. I'm going to stay regulated. I'm going to be curious about where this is coming from. If it's about me, I need to do the reflection. If it's not about me, I need to understand. I don't know what's happening right now. That's what we're not doing right now in America. And we need to do more of it. So, long story back around to you. Um, I really appreciate you participating in that group. And it's nice to hear that, when you were doing that podcast, that anti-racist uh, podcast, and doing this group work that we had, that you were also still moving and you were still thinking and you were still evolving. And that we're going to still be evolving the day we pass over into the next life. So can you speak to a little bit of what I just reflected back to you?
Yes, and I think that is the authenticity piece for me,
Mhm.
is realizing that I have to be willing to say who I am,
Mhm.
what I believe, and what I stand for without being afraid.
Yes.
And being willing to put myself out there. I have a professional Facebook page and a personal Facebook page. I put up what was it? Anti-Elon Tesla Club. Not thinking that it was just like my background picture, not thinking it was any big deal. And this guy I had worked with 40 years ago went off about, basically I was naive and not very smart, and how could and I was like, wow, one little banner photo did all that.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I just held firm. This is my belief. I don't believe these Doge cuts were very well researched.
Right.
I agree. I agree. Government needs to be looked at and corrected in its spending, but you can't come in and slash and burn without research.
Mm-mm.
And I thought, wow, because I came out of kind of a media background, I expected there to be more liberals.
Right.
And I've been shocked. I'm thinking, we did cocaine together.
You sure you want this out there? Come on.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I'm very clear. I'm a recovering alcoholic and
Good.
drug addict. And, back in the 80s, I was a wild child. But I'm thinking, how could we have done all that? And now you're going to jump on me about Elon Musk. What?
Hmm.
But what I'm also thinking and I would love to know your opinion of this or your witnessing. I think that many liberal Americans,
Mm-hmm.
and I won't say all Democrats, but are certainly much more to the left than we are to the center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And my aunt is 80 and her friends are 80 and over, and I'm a senior. I think we're leaning a lot more left than in this country than what is imagined.
Mm.
That there's some idea we need to come back to the center. Well, how about the center moved over here?
Mm. Okay.
Do you see that?
That's a good point. I'm going to have to give some more thought to that. I mean, I, most of my family, here comes Lisa Blount. Oh, she's coming in just in time. Hey. That's a picture of her. That's not her live. Um, there she goes. There she is.
Hi.
I have yet another Lisa in the room. That's awesome. Yeah.
Oh, hi, Lisa.
Yeah. We have a lot of Lisas in this group. Yeah.
Are we recording?
We're recording. Is that okay with you? I can cut this
It's
part out if I
fine.
need to, but
Okay, because let me put me a background on. But I was like, I said I didn't. I'm sorry, I messed the time up again.
well, Lisa H, we the second round, well, the first round was too. We have people in multiple states, but this time around with the four groups that participated, we had people in every time zone. So I had to say, all the four time zones. Anyway, glad you're here, coming live from Houston. Is that right?
Thank you,
Yeah,
Houston, Texas.
yeah. As you both know, I'm hoping that as we scale these story groups out, that those of you who've gone through it, the 9 sessions, can help co-facilitate for pay, because this is going to be an intervention and implementation in corporate settings. So, would you speak just a minute? First of all, Lisa, what we were talking about before you came in was a lot about white privilege and the lessons that we both learned, just how learning is ongoing, and sometimes, we have to not be afraid to do learn to learn what we don't know, but also do the research. And anyway, what if you put you on the spot here? What would you say is one or two of your core values?
Yeah, you did put me on the spot. I would say I guess my top ones
Mhm.
would be connection
Hey,
and authenticity right now.
that's the same thing she said. Okay, so that's good. Yeah, I think that I must draw the people who believe in being authentic into these kinds of situations. So out there in America, if authenticity is something you value, get in touch with me. Let's talk. But say a little bit more, Lisa Blunt, as to why those that matters to you.
I think authenticity because it's one thing that I struggled with because as a Black woman, there are so many layers of things that we have to cover up and to conform to that are outside of how how I know to be like instinctually at home.
Mm-hmm.
So it has been like even just like I mentioned before, like just how changing my hair
Yep.
or changing the way we speak, code switching, and just doing things that would make you more acceptable to white folks, but also that that had become so much survival
Yeah.
tactics that it just became like this. I don't know where I am. I don't really know who I am or where I fit in. I have to act this way here, but then not here. And
Yeah.
so to get to a space where I can feel authentic about using my voice and not feeling like I needed to change it or change the inflections to not offend somebody else or to not make somebody else feel like what I was trying to say was not to like a slight or something, just to make other people feel comfortable has
Yeah.
been in a journey. So that is something that I have and am still learning to embrace and to help other women embrace too.
but you come in like right after anybody who watches this all the way through, and when you go back and watch this all the way through, I mean, you'll go, wow, well, I just popped in right when I needed to. That was exactly that was a God thing, right? Wasn't that a God thing? Yeah, we were just talking about how DEI does not need to be erased and cut out of programs because this is an ongoing problematic history lesson that white people in particular have gotten too triggered about taking time and setting themselves aside to learn. And so, thank you for saying that. And did that cause you to feel any kind of way? Because I know somebody's going to ask, you know,
Even now, even with the work that I do, even feeling comfortable in a space with you and knowing that we'll even know each other in person, but I know that I'm safe with you to be able to speak freely.
yeah,
I'm still like, say it. And I think even one thing I stand on is what Ruth Bader Ginsburg, it's a quote from her, say it even if your voice shakes.
yeah,
So I think that has allowed me, given me some freedom to be able to push through some of those tough moments, but even the moments are shorter.
yeah, hmm,
Like where I would have shrunk back and where I would have just been like, oh, now everything is,
yeah,
it's okay now. Now it's kind of even when it's like some trepidation or how will people perceive that, even though that's not how I want to operate.
yeah,
Within, in terms of authenticity, but still, yeah, it gave me a little bit, but not, it's a smaller amount, if that makes sense, or
yeah,
it lasts for a shorter amount of time to be able to push through to that point.
yeah. I had some legacy of traumatic experience. I think that still we're trying to work through as a
Yeah.
nation, as Americans. And what we have going on right now is not helping any of that. In fact, it's not making America great. It's setting us back, way back, at least in this kind of a, as you say, moment where connection needs to be prioritized. So since you said connection, how did you come to that value?
I think my parents, I say that's a gift from my parents.
Mm,
I think in all the ways we can look at our parents and think they weren't perfect people, and then you start to realize that they weren't more than our parents. They were actually people outside of being
yeah,
our parents.
yeah,
When you start to accept that and start realizing, I remember walking with my dad. I couldn't have been more than 7, but I remember walking with him and everybody would say hi to him. Everybody.
yeah,
And I'm like, who is that, Dad? Who is that? He's like, I don't know. I'm just saying hi.
yeah,
But the reality is he just had a presence that drew people to him, one, but two, he was also very popular. So he did know a lot of people, because a lot of people would, my last name is Blunt, but people would say, "Hey, Blunt, how you doing?" So I knew that he knew a lot of people. And even when I came across people who, when we weren't together as in my 20s and stuff, people would say, "You Blunt's daughter, ain't you?"
uh-huh,
Because they would say, "You look just like him." I know. And I came from Trenton, New Jersey, and it's a smaller town, but it's just so I go back to saying that's a gift that my parents gave me. My mom we would have porch parties where we would sit on the porch, and we lived across the street from a hospital. So a lot of people, she used to work at that hospital, and then she worked at the psychiatric hospital not far. So near our house was a restaurant. People would come from the psychiatric hospital, and they would get their lunch from that little Dominican bodega. And they would come sit on the porch with us if we was on the porch in the daytime, or in the evenings. People would come. My family would come by. Our house was always the house people knew they can come to and just kind of relax and just kind of like your home kind of place. Not, not anything outlandish, but just they would come and they would just be comfortable. And it was just always that place. So I think it's definitely a gift that came from, I always admired it, and I
yeah,
always wanted to be able to kind of stand in that. And it's only recently that I learned that I took the one assessment a few years ago, and it was one of my top it was one of my top scores. And I was like, oh wow, that aligns with that, because I never associated what they were doing with connections.
that's
But
fine.
I never associated what those things. But as I bring up people
Mm,
knowing him, being familiar with him, I just
yeah,
kind of was like, he's popular. Maybe that's what I want to be. So
uh-huh,
that even that added to me being um a people pleaser
Yeah.
in some ways conforming to perfectionism and things like that. But as I'm learning to evolve and as I've grown, I understand now that it's about the authenticity of it and the connections of it.
Yeah. Hmm. That's good. I really love that. That was beautiful. I'm glad I didn't tell you ahead of time. I was going to ask you that question so you could just pop that forth. That's authentic when you can just come forth with something like that. And I was walking along with you, seeing your dad speak to people. You don't know this, but we were talking about being 5 and 7 year olds, and we're earlier. And so what it was like to learn some lessons being the only white person in African American spaces, black spaces, and
Oh, wow.
realizing that, there was something to be gained from that experience that kind of stayed with us through our life. So I look forward to hearing what you got to say when you listen more to Lisa's story too. And I connected with you because my dad is the same way. Everybody knows him and calls out to him, or he speaks to everybody. I mean, he literally speaks to everybody. And my mother worked at a psychiatric hospital, so
Oh, wow.
no, I didn't know that we had that in common. That's interesting.
Didn't
But I
know.
did know about the porch, the safe space of the porch, and it's like hospitality was something that you grew up
Yeah.
with, and safety and making psychological safe spaces a reality. And that makes complete sense. I didn't know you lived down the street from a psychiatric hospital. Yeah. It's fascinating how human beings evolve and develop and what shapes and influences our values, isn't it? It's a
It's very fast. As you saying that, I'm like, I can't even like respond with words because I'm like, wow, wow, wow.
I know, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I loved about participating in these groups, these storytelling groups, and why I'm excited about trying to implement these into workplace settings because I think it's going to be a healing balm um, for our country. Hopefully, that becomes more about bringing people together than making that division deeper. Would you all speak a little bit about what your experience is like? Because you did it in two different times.
In what sense, Melissa?
Just like what are some of the things you remember about being in that group and um, what are some of the takeaways and would you do it again?
Absolutely. I think there is learning that can be gained in group setting. I've done, uh, a lot of individual therapy, and
Mhm.
um, I find groups to be different teaching mechanisms because, sometimes there's going to be somebody that I think, "Oh, I have no idea what they're talking about. I can't relate." And then there'll be someone else that'll be like, damn, that's me. That is my story.
Mhm.
And even the ones that are like, huh, I don't really get it, a lot of times it'll be something food for me to ponder.
Yeah.
So I think it's great to have different people. And I think your idea of the storytelling behind it makes so much sense. And
Mhm.
I was thinking for me too, now it's really giving up the need to be liked.
Mm.
I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm not. The people that like me really like me. And then I'm sure there are other people that are just like, something ain't right. That girl's like way out. And that's okay because I used to want everybody to like me. But what I gave up was liking myself. For everybody to like me, I had to compromise so much of who I was. And now it's kind of like, and some of that I think comes with age, and some of it comes with embracing that I am who I am.
Mhm.
And I will say, my kids had a hard time with me after the election. I just said, y'all, I can't watch the news.
Mhm.
I'm going to be watching a lot of murder shows because to me that was easier to watch. And they're like,
I was
but
like, wait,
mom,
murder show?
yeah, I'd rather watch people get cut, sliced,
Oh,
diced, put in freezers.
oh.
And they said, but mom, you need to know what's going on. I said, I will get to that. But for right now, for my own mental health, I cannot be inundated with that level of negativity and still take the light that's in me out to shine.
That's so well said.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I thought they just, they had to understand that's just how I'm wired.
Mhm.
And what was interesting was my son got even more politically active,
Mm.
and my daughter too, while I've kind of taken a little bit of a step back and now am coming back into the open spaces again.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that. Lisa Blunt, what was your experience like with these story groups?
My experience with the story groups was, I think, a part of it was me realizing, kind of encouraging me more. That's why when I saw your message about it, I signed up initially anyway, just encouraging me more to be able to tell my story. Um, but also I think the commonalities that we have, I mean, being in a group with mostly white women,
Yeah.
but not not realizing, I mean, not that I didn't realize it. I think I mentioned to you before my experience with a therapist. She was a white woman, white psychologist. She was Jewish. Um, and just her centering herself in my session, because I at the time I said, well, if somebody is good at what they do, it doesn't matter, right? This is what I was telling myself. It doesn't matter culturally. None of those things matter if they're good at what they do and you go on to them for a specific thing, which I was going to them. I think I was going to her at the time. I was getting ready to go. I wanted to jump off the ledge into my divorce. And I
Mm.
figured, somebody, it doesn't matter what culture somebody is to help with that. And as I told her a story about my sons and also his son, uh, which was, I count him as a bonus, as a part of my life, that also made it difficult to leave the marriage.
Mhm.
But and as I told her the story about something that, the things that I was concerned about, and she centered herself around being harmed by black
Oh.
men, essentially, as I was worried about my black boys being looked at as men.
Mhm.
Um, that hurt. It hurt. It cut deep. And I didn't even have the language to say how much it hurt. I just remember getting in the car and crying because
Yeah.
I felt so deeply for it. And it reminded me of almost some of the experiences that I had. I used to go to dance. I was telling somebody today, I used to go to dance school when I was younger. And I remember for our recital, most of the people at the dance school were white. And the teachers and the owners were white. And I remember we had to get new tights for our costumes. And I was like, what does I remember being so young asking my mom, what does nude mean? Because I know they don't mean naked. Like, what does nude mean, mom? And she said skin tone. And I remember looking at the selection and I was like, none of these are my skin tone.
Mm. Yeah.
And they were all like they were like coffee. They said coffee color. I was like, that's not even the color of coffee. Like, that was even light to me. Um
Yeah.
and I just I remember some of the things that we had that I had to fit into. So they didn't have darker tights. I remember my mom going out of her way after a couple years to order special tights from somewhere. I don't know where she got them from, but she would always go out of her way to find things that let me know that I belonged.
Oh,
That's the
yeah.
other part. The other thing that I think is important to me, belonging. And
Belong.
now belonging without othering after having this experience with this group, it has become more important as I stay on topic.
Mhm.
Um the some of the people at the dance school were very very nasty. And I was like, why are these people so nasty? They would do stuff and then they would cry.
Mm.
So if they would push me or do something or get in my face, they would probably not push me or physically touch me. I think somebody did pinch me one time. Or no, she pushed me and I pinched her.
Okay.
And I got in trouble.
Mm.
And because she cried, I didn't. I was like, you better get out my face. And and she cried and
Mhm.
it taught me how much those tears meant.
Mhm.
And so in the group, so even having those experiences, I had still, of course, I work with white women, and I always thought to myself, I never had any white friends outside of work,
Mhm. The reason I
because
made
it
that
was
face,
just,
Lisa, is we just talked about, she and I, how white women's tears will cut those conversations off. I just
oh
talked
yeah,
before you came in here.
oh wow, this is like all God to me.
I know it is. Yeah.
um, it so having those experiences of like some of the just the nastiness, and but also
Mhm.
sometimes weaved in, it was like people who I literally remember having the thought, but they're white, but they're nice.
Yeah, but still, it's the extra work I'm hearing that you're saying it has to it comes, that you're having to do to even have that thought. And the
Yeah.
extra work is the problem.
The extra work is like that is the privilege that
Yeah.
people don't realize exists. They'll say, "Oh, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth." But the fact that you don't have to do the extra work to think that, to even conceptualize it, is the privilege that we talk about, that often gets escaped.
Hmm. I mean,
Thank you
would
for
that
saying
we
that.
really go get to that place? And I hope that we do, but we're not there yet, and we're going backwards as it is, you know. So yeah.
Let me just tie it up though.
Yeah,
I
please.
think the thing I was saying in terms of the group too is that it also brought me back to a place of realizing that we have a lot of things in common. And sometimes it's a lot easier to look at the negative things that happen and think that this is the broader picture of what's happening.
Hmm.
Um, Even looking at the election and how this happened is like,
Yeah.
it almost makes you feel like, well, like, how, how come nobody was thinking about the other people? But the other thing that comes with all of this is that I think people don't think of situations until
Hmm.
you're like when I
Yeah.
until they have to think about it. Until
Oh yeah.
sometimes it just doesn't come to conscious until they have to think about it.
Yeah. 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 That's well said. But it also makes sense that you would want to work only with Black women in a space where you can help Black women heal without having me and Lisa be in the space and, do any of the things that having them do the extra work to just say, well, it's okay if Lisa says it's okay.
Well, Melissa and I are going to cry on you. I can promise.
Oh, that's the other thing. And I mean, Susan either. I'm like, well, that was the other thing in the group. It's like these some tough ladies, but also you really stand for what you mean, and that
Mm.
gave me a different appreciation just for women in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about what you're trying to do right now, what's important to you. And then I'd like to hear from you too, Lisa, about what you're trying to do. Lisa Henderson.
But I work a lot with Black women in spaces experiencing workplace stress, racial trauma. A lot of times they come from the same things that we're talking about. This experience of white supremacy and just the separation of all these things. And if you don't fit into this box, then you don't belong.
Mm.
And people and have and us and Black women feeling like you have to like do things a certain way, but only to our detriment, because they increase our stress, they increase our anxiety, and they increase, once your stress is increased, your cortisol levels are increased, your sleep is interrupted, your melatonin levels are undetectable. So those they affect our health in the long run. So I do a lot of work with, I'm doing actually coaching groups now, starting coaching groups and doing some I have a mini masterclass coming up next week, next Saturday. And it's just about the stress and how to alleviate those things, because they cause those things, the people please, those things maintain, and I don't think they cause it, but they maintain and uphold the people pleasing, the disingenuine nature, being not being able to be authentic, increased levels of anxiety, increased depression. So working to really, really hone in on our joy and just be at peace, and realizing that who we are is enough,
Yeah.
and everything else that we do is the output of a bonus that we have to offer, and not that we need to offer these things to be accepted,
Hmm.
but that we have these things to offer, but not to be accepted by a broader culture or a broader by people in general.
What about you, Lisa? What are you into now? What are you doing now?
Well, my newest thing is I've done radio shows and podcasts. They weren't podcasts back then. They were audio series on parenting teenagers, on uh, parenting all ages, then an anti-racist pro-Black podcast. And what happened was I realized I had other topics I wanted to talk about that fell outside of the realm of any of the ones I had. So what I decided to do was to rip away any of the professional radio broadcasting background and go with my nickname when I was a little girl, which is Lily.
Mhm.
And it's my grandmother nickname too. So that's really like me, like who I am. So I just do podcasts now on just whatever I want to talk
Whatever you
about.
want to
If
talk about.
something interests me, I just I ran into a lady at Goodwill the other day and we got to talking. Turns out she's a health and wellness coach. And I was like, I'd love to have you on my podcast. So I just met her for coffee. And it was like, it was just a God thing, you
Mhm.
know, as somebody standing next to you at the rack at the Goodwill
Yep.
that ends up being a contact. And so I'm just kind of whatever. So I've talked about everything from a friend of mine who was in prison, a couple of friends that were in prison, who lost a lot, regained a lot, politics, mothering, just kind of like
Whatever you want to do.
whatever
Lily.
pops up.
Lily or Lele? Lily? Lily?
Lily,
Okay. So
Leelee.
you don't even have
Lily
Lisa
like
Blount?
Lisa, Melissa.
Huh? Oh yeah, of
Lily like
course.
Lisa.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Melissa is sort of like Lisa, right? I mean,
It is. I
Yeah,
used to want my
it is.
name to be Melissa too when I was a kid.
oh really?
Yeah,
That's hilarious. Well, I can't wait to, I don't think I've met you in person either, Lisa H. Um,
I know. And we live not too far from
I
each other
know.
now.
I know.
I'm in town.
This is so enjoyable. I do feel like we're sitting on your porch, Lisa Blunt, or your mother's porch, and it's invaluable to do this. And I really appreciate you all partnering with me in this adventure because I think
Oh,
it's
thank you for
important,
asking.
and I respect the work that you're doing that I'm learning about still. So you'll have to get Lisa Blunt as a guest on your podcast.
I'd love to.
And she's
Oh, I
got
would
something.
love to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, listen, I think what we've done is demonstrate how stories make change. And that was given to me actually out of the blue. The titles that I'm using really were God, were the Holy Spirit for me. That's how I interpret it. That just lands on you. I was walking one day and mental wealth came to mind. I'm like, well, I know that's a play on mental health, but this wealth thing, how are we going to talk about wealth? And it didn't occur to me at the time that that was something I needed to do for a larger project that I didn't see coming. And then honestly, uh, in 2020, I believe, however long ago that was, 20, I don't remember how long, but anyway, I started a YouTube channel based on there's always more to the story. And so
Mm.
stories make change was the part of and that I printed that up like on April the 9th. So isn't that funny? Yeah. So I had no idea when I scheduled this space to do this in this library. Shout out to Sewell Mill Library, by the way.
I love it.
I'd had no idea that I had set it up, just almost to the day, and then almost to the day of when I was in Greenwood, Mississippi, as a 5-year old. This is I was there during uh, the murder and the funeral for Dr. Martin Luther King. So you can imagine, you
You
know,
have such a fascinating life.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, and I was a 5-year old trying to be with this woman. Her name was Rosie. She was a nurse and she was trying to teach me lessons. I'll tell about those later. But anyway, it was it's impacted me my whole life. So storiesmakechange@gmail.com. If you're listening to this and you want to find a way to bring these beautiful people and some others that are on the team into your space to facilitate stories, we are ready. There's a 3-layer 9-session implementation. They know what I'm talking about, and it make a difference in multiple ways that are immeasurable in your work culture. So I hope you will write to me at storiesmakechange@gmail.com and ask me for a return on your investment. We have a program and a package that we're ready to scale out and roll out with you. Thank you both. Any last words?
Love it. Ah, thank you.
I just want to say I want to make sure
everybody is welcome. So I feel like I should mention that everybody is welcome. I gear more of my material toward Black women because there's not a lot of resources for us, and we've been limited in that way. But everybody is welcome on the porch. I might change to the porch to something to mine too. I like yours, Lisa.
Yeah. I mean, that's a beautiful image in mind to have too, so yeah, thinking about sitting on somebody's porch and
Yeah.
being safe and belonging,
Yeah.
no matter whatever kind of crazy background you have going on. And I don't say that disrespectfully, because I know you were talking about psychiatric mental health issues, but belonging, even when the world will label you as crazy, is still,
Yeah.
So our narratives matter. Okay,
Thanks
thank you
for
both.
pulling this together, Melissa. And Lisa, good to meet you.
Good to meet you too, Lisa.
Okay. All right. Bye, y'all.